I almost didn't attend the reunion. When Marcus called and invited me, I paused for a long moment. We hadn't spoken much since the divorce, and I couldn't think of a single reason to spend an entire evening surrounded by people who still remembered us as a married couple. Still, something inside me whispered that it was time to stop running from the past. I told myself I was going for me, not for him. The event was held at a beautiful hotel ballroom on the edge of the city. When I walked in, the room was already alive with former classmates laughing, chatting, and reliving old memories. For a moment, I actually felt at ease. A few old friends embraced me warmly, and I began to think maybe accepting the invitation had been the right choice after all. That comfort didn't last long. Marcus seemed to appear everywhere I turned. Every conversation somehow became an opportunity for him to make some remark about my life. He wore a polite smile while saying things that sounded harmless on the surface, but I understood exactly what he was doing. At one table, he joked that some people never truly recover after divorce. At another, he described how much his life had transformed over the past few years. Every comment was aimed at me, even though he never mentioned my name. Some guests looked uncomfortable, others laughed politely because they weren't sure how else to react. I tried to ignore it completely. I reminded myself that I wasn't the same broken woman I had been 3 years ago. I wasn't going to argue with him or let him steal my peace. So I smiled, stayed calm, and kept talking with people who were genuinely glad to see me. But deep inside, I felt embarrassed. The worst part wasn't what Marcus was saying. It was knowing that he wanted an audience for every word. He wanted every single person in that ballroom to see him as the winner and me as the one left behind. As the evening progressed, his confidence swelled. He seemed convinced that no one would ever dare challenge him. Then I quietly glanced at the time on my phone. A small, knowing smile crossed my lips. Someone very important was about to walk through those doors, and Marcus had absolutely no idea his entire night was about to be turned upside down. Looking back now, the warning signs were there long before our marriage collapsed. When Marcus first launched his construction company, life was anything but easy. We shared a small apartment on the poorer side of town and worried about every single bill that arrived. There were entire months when money was so tight we had to plan every grocery trip with military precision. I believed in him with my whole heart. While he focused on growing the business, I picked up extra hours wherever I could. Sometimes I took weekend shifts just to help cover expenses. I handled every household responsibility and did everything in my power to make sure he had one less thing to worry about. I truly thought we were building our future together, brick by brick. For a while, things seemed to be finally working. The company slowly grew successful, more clients arrived, projects got bigger, and money stopped being a daily concern. I expected the stress would finally lift, and that we would enjoy the fruits of our shared labor. Instead, Marcus began transforming into someone I barely recognized. He grew impatient and easily irritated. Conversations that once lasted for hours became short and cold. He stopped asking about my day. He stopped valuing my opinions. Whenever I tried to discuss our relationship, he acted as if I was the one creating problems out of nothing. At first, I blamed the pressure of running a growing business. I kept telling myself things would get better once he had more time to breathe. They never did. The more successful he became, the further away he drifted. He started attending events without me and spending more nights away from home. His excuses never quite added up, but I wanted so desperately to trust my husband. Then, one evening, the truth found me all on its own. I wasn't searching for evidence. I wasn't trying to catch him, but a single message appeared on his phone that answered every painful question I had been silently asking myself for months. There was another woman. My hands trembled as I read enough to understand what was truly happening. When I confronted Marcus, I expected denial, or perhaps even a moment of guilt. Instead, he looked annoyed that I had discovered his secret. What wounded me most was what came next. He blamed me for everything. According to him, our marriage had failed because I wasn't supportive enough, exciting enough, or ambitious enough. A few weeks later, he officially filed for divorce. Just like that, the life we had built together for years began to crumble. The months after the divorce were some of the darkest of my entire life. Everything shifted at once. The legal process moved with brutal speed, and before I had time to fully process what was happening, I was trying to figure out how to survive on my own again. Every single decision felt overwhelming. I had poured years into building a life with someone, and now I was starting completely from scratch. What shocked me the most was how many people simply vanished. Friends I had known for years stopped calling. Invitations stopped arriving in my mailbox. People who once sat around my dinner table suddenly acted like they hardly knew me. Some never even bothered to ask for my side of the story. It became painfully clear that many of them had simply accepted whatever Marcus had told them. I wanted so badly to defend myself, but I was completely exhausted. I didn't have the energy to fight rumors while trying to rebuild my life from nothing. Financially, things were extremely difficult too. I had to watch every single dollar. There were nights when I sat at my small kitchen table, surrounded by bills, wondering how I was ever going to make everything work. Some days I felt strong and unstoppable. Other days, I could barely find the strength to get out of bed. The hardest moments came when I saw how effortlessly Marcus seemed to move on. He appeared everywhere with his new girlfriend, Diana. They attended parties, business events, and family gatherings, as if their relationship had always existed. Watching that hurt more than I ever wanted to admit. It felt as though the years I had invested in my marriage meant absolutely nothing. While I was struggling to piece my life back together, he seemed completely untouched by any of it. Slowly, I began questioning myself. Maybe people really did see me as the problem. Maybe they truly believed I had failed as a wife. Those thoughts followed me everywhere I went. They made every setback feel twice as heavy. Still, no matter how difficult things became, I refused to stop moving forward. Some days the progress was tiny. Sometimes it was nothing more than surviving the day without breaking down completely. I didn't know what my future would eventually look like. I only knew I couldn't stay stuck forever. The betrayal had carved deep wounds, and healing was far slower than I had ever expected. But somewhere beneath all the disappointment and loneliness, a small part of me still believed that life had something better waiting ahead. About 1 year after the divorce, I signed up to help with a community volunteer project. A powerful storm had damaged several homes in a nearby town, and local organizations were working together to help families rebuild their lives. I joined because I desperately needed something positive to focus on. On the very first day, I met David Carter. He wasn't the type of man who tried to be the center of attention. While others talked, David worked. He carried supplies, helped families move their belongings, and treated every single person with genuine respect. At first, I didn't pay much attention to him. I had become extremely careful about letting new people into my life. Trust didn't come easily to me anymore. I kept my conversations short and focused entirely on the work. But David never pushed. He was friendly without ever being intrusive. He remembered small details about people and always offered help whenever someone needed it. There was something calm and genuine about him that made everyone around him feel comfortable and safe. Over the following weeks, we ended up working together often. Our conversations began with simple things. We talked about the project, favorite restaurants, movies we enjoyed, and ordinary, everyday life. Gradually, those conversations became longer and deeper. One quiet afternoon, I shared a little about my painful past. I expected awkward questions or unwanted advice. Instead, David simply listened. He didn't judge me or try to tell me how I should feel. He just listened with his whole heart. That meant more to me than he probably ever realized. As time passed, I noticed something shifting inside me. For the first time in a very long while, I wasn't constantly glancing over my shoulder at the past. I wasn't measuring every day against the pain I had endured. David had a beautiful way of reminding me that my life was so much bigger than the things that had happened to me. Whenever I doubted myself, he gently encouraged me to keep moving forward. When I talked about ideas or dreams, he treated them seriously instead of dismissing them like others had. Little by little, my confidence began returning. What started as a simple friendship grew into one of the most important relationships in my entire life. I looked forward to seeing him, talking with him, and spending time together. For the first time since my world had fallen apart, I allowed myself to believe that happiness might still be possible. And that thought no longer felt impossible. As my relationship with David grew stronger, other parts of my life began transforming too. For years, I had been fascinated by interior design. I loved creating comfortable spaces and finding ways to make a house truly feel like a home. It was something I enjoyed deeply, but I had never seriously considered turning it into a career. One evening, I showed David a few design projects I had put together for friends and family members. Instead of treating it like a small hobby, he saw real potential in what I was doing. He encouraged me to take the idea seriously and build something entirely my own. At first, I wasn't sure I could actually do it. Starting a business felt incredibly risky, especially after everything I had already been through. But David believed in me completely. With his steady support, I began taking on small projects. One client led to another. Soon, I was spending most of my days meeting customers, planning designs, and learning everything I possibly could about the industry. The work wasn't easy at all. There were long nights, unexpected problems, and moments when I questioned every single decision I made. But every challenge taught me something valuable. As the business grew, I discovered abilities I never knew I had. I became more confident when making important decisions. I learned how to manage complex projects and communicate clearly with demanding clients. Most importantly, I stopped seeing myself as someone who had failed at life. I began seeing myself as someone completely capable of building a future. The business continued growing beyond anything I had ever imagined. Each success felt like proof that I was finally moving in the right direction. Through all of it, David remained faithfully by my side. He celebrated every milestone, no matter how small. He never tried to take credit for my achievements. He simply wanted to see me succeed. One beautiful weekend, both of our families gathered for a small backyard dinner. I thought it was just a chance for everyone to spend time together. Near the end of the evening, David quietly stood up and asked for everyone's attention. Then he turned toward me. With our families and closest friends watching, he told me exactly how much I meant to him and how deeply grateful he was to have me in his life. Then he got down on one knee. The answer came instantly. For the first time, I truly understood what a real partnership looked like, and I happily said yes. From the outside, Marcus's life still looked absolutely perfect. He continued driving expensive cars, attending important events, and boasting about business success whenever he got the chance. Anyone glancing from a distance would assume everything was going exactly the way he wanted it to. But the reality behind closed doors was drastically different. Problems were quietly piling up. His relationship with Diana was not nearly as happy as people believed. They argued constantly, especially about money and control. Both of them enjoyed being in charge, which created endless tension between them. At the same time, Marcus was facing growing troubles at his construction company. Several experienced employees had quietly left over the past year. Some were exhausted from being blamed whenever something went wrong. Others simply no longer wanted to work under his leadership style. Replacing skilled workers proved far harder than Marcus had ever expected. As projects became more complicated, mistakes started costing the company serious money. Instead of accepting responsibility, Marcus searched for someone else to blame. He convinced himself the problems were only temporary and refused to listen to advice from the people around him. More than anything else, he cared about protecting his carefully polished image. He wanted everyone to believe he was successful, powerful, and always in complete control. Even when things were falling apart, he continued acting as if nothing was wrong. Then he began hearing news about me. Mutual acquaintances spoke about my growing business. Some mentioned my engagement to David. Others talked about how happy and confident I now seemed. The more Marcus heard, the more it truly bothered him. He had expected me to remain trapped in the past forever. He never once imagined I would build a successful life without him. What should have been none of his business became a full obsession. He started asking questions about my company and my personal life. Whenever my name came up in conversation, he acted uninterested, but people noticed how closely he actually listened. The truth was simple. My success wounded his ego. He wanted to be the one who moved on and thrived. Seeing me happy directly challenged the story he had been telling himself for years. Eventually, he became determined to prove he was still better than me. And when he learned about the upcoming high school reunion, an idea slowly began forming in his mind. He saw it as the perfect stage to put himself back in the spotlight and remind everyone who he believed was truly the winner. The reunion unfolds. A few months before the reunion, I received an unexpected phone call from Marcus. His tone was surprisingly polite. He explained that several former classmates were organizing a large reunion and thought it would be lovely if everyone attended. He spoke as if the entire past was completely behind us and acted as though there were absolutely no hard feelings between us. The conversation felt strange, but not suspicious enough for me to refuse outright. After thinking about it for several days, I finally decided to go. I wasn't attending for Marcus. I wanted to reconnect with old classmates and finally close that chapter of my life. I felt strong enough to walk into a room filled with so many memories. When I told David about the event, he supported my decision immediately. Unfortunately, he already had an important business obligation scheduled for that exact same evening. He apologized sincerely and promised he would try his very best to make it if his meeting ended early. I told him not to worry at all. By then, I truly believed I could handle the reunion entirely on my own. The evening started normally enough. People greeted each other warmly and shared stories about where life had taken them. For a short time, everything appeared fine. Then I began noticing a very clear pattern. Whenever Marcus joined a conversation, he somehow steered the attention toward personal achievements, financial success, or career accomplishments. He spoke at length about his company and the expensive projects he was involved in. He made absolutely sure everyone heard about his latest purchases and business deals. At first, I simply ignored it. But then he started asking carefully chosen questions that drew attention to difficult periods of my past. Questions designed to compare our lives without making his intentions too obvious. The more conversations I listened to, the more I understood what was truly happening. This wasn't a coincidence at all. Marcus had spent weeks creating an environment where he could look impressive while making me appear less successful. Realizing that hurt deeply. Part of me wanted to confront him right then and there, but I knew that would only give him exactly what he wanted, so I stayed completely calm. I answered questions politely, smiled when necessary, and refused to argue. Even though I felt disappointed, I wasn't going to let him control my emotions ever again. What Marcus didn't realize was that his entire plan depended on me reacting, and I had absolutely no intention of giving him that satisfaction. As the evening continued, Marcus grew more confident by the minute. The attention he had been chasing all night seemed to encourage him further. He moved from group to group, telling stories and making certain people listened. Several classmates appeared visibly uncomfortable, but nobody wanted to create tension at the event. Then Marcus crossed a serious line. Standing near one of the tables, he made a joke about our past marriage. He laughed loudly and suggested that I probably regretted losing someone as impressive as him. A few people forced small, awkward laughs. Others looked away in discomfort. The entire room suddenly felt very quiet. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, waiting to see how I would respond. My face grew warm with embarrassment, but I refused to argue. I had spent far too many years letting Marcus's behavior affect me, so I stayed silent. Marcus seemed pleased with himself. He probably thought he had finally won the evening. Then something completely unexpected happened. The ballroom doors opened. Several people glanced toward the entrance. A tall African man in a sharp, dark suit stepped inside and calmly surveyed the room. The moment I saw him, I smiled. It was David. His meeting had ended earlier than expected. As soon as he spotted me, he walked across the ballroom with complete confidence. There was nothing arrogant about the way he carried himself. He simply looked genuinely happy to see me. When he reached me, he wrapped his arm around my shoulder and asked if I was having a good evening. Just hearing his voice made me feel infinitely better. The entire mood in the room shifted immediately. People began introducing themselves to him. David greeted everyone politely. He treated every single person with respect, whether they were successful business owners or old classmates he had never met before. When someone asked about my work, David smiled warmly. He talked about how hard I had worked to build my business and how proud he was of everything I had accomplished. He didn't exaggerate, he didn't brag. He simply spoke honestly and with love. For the first time all evening, people weren't focused on Marcus. They were focused entirely on the woman I had become and the beautiful life I had built. As I glanced around the room, I noticed something interesting. The admiration David showed me made a far stronger impression than all of Marcus's boasting combined. And Marcus knew it too. After David arrived, the atmosphere in the ballroom continued to shift in ways Marcus never anticipated. People who had been quietly listening all evening suddenly felt more comfortable speaking their minds. Small conversations began taking place around the room. And before long, those conversations began revealing things Marcus probably never wanted anyone to hear. Near one table, a former employee of Marcus's company was speaking with several classmates. I overheard part of the discussion. He described what it had truly been like working for Marcus and how difficult it had become over the years. According to him, employees were routinely blamed for problems they hadn't caused. Several others nearby nodded knowingly, as if they had heard similar stories before. At another table, a few classmates were discussing the divorce openly. One woman admitted she had never fully believed the version of events she had been fed years earlier. Another said she had always suspected there was more to the story than Marcus had shared. For the very first time, people were questioning the polished image Marcus had so carefully constructed for so long. As the evening went on, Marcus grew visibly irritated. He could see attention slipping away from him, and he clearly didn't like it one bit. Then things became even worse for him. Marcus and Diana started arguing in a corner. At first, they tried to keep their voices low, but frustration quickly took over completely. Several guests noticed the tension almost immediately. During the argument, Diana made a comment she probably regretted the moment it left her mouth. She mentioned serious financial problems connected to Marcus's business and openly questioned some of the decisions he had been making recently. Nearby conversations stopped instantly. People heard enough to understand that Marcus's situation was nowhere near as perfect as he had claimed all night. The reaction was immediate. Guests exchanged shocked, meaningful looks. Some seemed genuinely stunned. Others suddenly understood exactly why Marcus had spent the entire evening trying so desperately to impress everyone in sight. Piece by piece, the image he had spent years constructing began collapsing in real time. Meanwhile, nobody was criticizing me. Instead, people were beginning to recognize something they had overlooked for years. Despite everything that had happened to me, I had rebuilt my life without ever attacking Marcus or chasing revenge. I had simply moved forward with grace. The irony was impossible to miss. Marcus had orchestrated the entire evening, hoping to embarrass me. Instead, by the end of the night, he had exposed only himself, and every single person in that room could clearly see it. The weeks following the reunion brought several unexpected surprises. I began receiving messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were former classmates. Others were old friends who had slowly drifted away after my divorce. Many of them wanted to apologize sincerely. They admitted they had accepted Marcus's version of events without ever bothering to ask for mine. Some said they deeply regretted judging me. Others thanked me for handling everything with such grace, even when life became almost unbearable. Reading those messages gave me a profound sense of peace, not because I needed validation, but because the truth had finally found its way to the surface, all on its own. Meanwhile, life continued moving forward beautifully. My business kept growing, and new opportunities appeared regularly. Projects became larger and more prestigious, and I found myself working with clients I once could only dream of reaching. At home, life was equally rewarding. Every day with David reminded me how completely different a healthy relationship could be. We supported each other, celebrated victories together, and faced challenges as a real team. Then, several months later, I received another completely unexpected message. It was from Marcus. He asked if we could meet privately. After thinking about it carefully, I agreed. When we finally sat down together, he seemed like a very different man from the one I remembered. He looked exhausted and far less confident than before. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he finally admitted something I never expected to hear. He said he had deeply underestimated me. He confessed that he had taken my loyalty, support, and sacrifices for granted for years. Watching me build a successful life had forced him to confront mistakes he had spent years avoiding. I listened quietly. There was no anger left inside me. There was also no desire whatsoever to reopen old wounds. When he finished speaking, I thanked him for being honest. But I made it very clear that the past would remain firmly in the past. I accepted his apology, but I wasn't interested in rebuilding any kind of relationship with him. As I walked away from that meeting, I felt lighter than I had felt in years. I finally understood something truly important. The best revenge was never about making Marcus suffer. It was about creating a life filled with happiness, purpose, love, and self-respect. And as I returned home to the people who truly cared about me, I realized I had already won a very long time ago.